Liz Lange, you are a fashion designer, entrepreneur, CEO of the Fig clothing line, and have been called a pioneer in the apparel industry. In 1997, you founded Liz Lange Maternity, which introduced form-fitting designer pregnancy wear, an innovation that reinvented maternity clothes. And in 2001, Nike asked you to partner on workout clothes and introduced a line of athletic wear for pregnant women. The same year, you were invited to unveil both lines at the first ever runway show by a maternity designer during Fashion Week in New York. You have been recognized with many awards, including Crane's Rising Star Award, Crane's 40 Under 40, Time Magazine's Most Powerful Entrepreneur, and have appeared on Oprah, CNBC, Fox News, and Bloomberg. In 2013, you were honored with the Spirit of Achievement Award from the Albert Einstein College of Medicine, and after being diagnosed with cervical cancer at the age of 35, are also an advocate and spokesperson for cancer prevention and treatment. Liz, you believe in the simplicity of a carry-on, the magic of sitting with friends under a blanket of stars, and the power of your current muse, 1970s Cher. Liz Lange, welcome to Cutting for Sign.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Liz, I'm laughing because of the breadth of people we've had on here. And I came to know you in a very backwards way or an unusual way. And that was Instagram served up one of your posts as a suggested, post or something. And I was captivated by your writing, your storytelling. And I did not know who you were. I had no context for anything that was going on, but I found it entertaining and compelling and honest. And despite the trappings of maybe trappings isn't the right word, despite the setting of glamour, very approachable. And I remember commenting on some of the posts, and you commented back some, for some reason. And I found it was one of the few accounts that I followed that was like for me, it wasn't like for like personal growth or something like that. And I really, for a long time, I had no idea anything other than just these stories, these capsules, these short stories. And I loved it. And when Daniel and I started this podcast a year ago, which is really about, finding the way towards our best self, I thought I want to talk to this person. And I still didn't know who you were. Well, you're a great storyteller. If there's one thing, we can say is you're a great storyteller.
Thank you.
And I think everything else, all the things that Daniel had just listed, which are fantastic and commendable, like really amazing. Like I think at your core, you're somebody who I found to be compelling because of your ability to tell a really good story with open hands and without a lot of like self-judgment, it seemed, and a lot of like real honest kindness, or at least acceptance in a really good way. That's probably understating what I'm trying to say, and I'm probably not even finding the right words, but that's how I was introduced to you and the algorithm.
Funny. How modern.
Yeah.
I'm very flattered. Thank you. That was very, very touching what you just said to me. I'm very moved. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's really again, like Ron said, the breadth of people and characters we have on here has been, we're pretty proud of it. And to have you on here, we're both really excited about it. And I think that, and I don't know you at all, but from a little bit of your content and learning a little bit about you through your bios, seems like you have a reputation for and are very grounded and down to earth, and also existing in and around a lot of high society and money, and actually having come from that. And that's a balance that Ronald and I just really value. I don't know if that's accurate to you, but it seems like it.
Thank you. I mean, I hope so. Thank you.
Yeah,
I think so.
Yeah. Is it difficult to manage that balance?
I never found it to be. That's just who I'm not saying like, oh, I'm such a great person. I just meant like, I don't really understand the not being kind of quote unquote real. I don't get that.
Mm.
So that's just sort of who I am. I will say though that when I first started, because you mentioned Instagram. So when I first sort of thought about Instagram at the beginning, I was kind of like, well, I'm of a generation, I'm of an age where it's not comfortable for me to be sharing a lot of like personal images. Like here I am, like in my beautiful home. Here I am in my bikini. It just is like, oh my God, no, you know, we just, some of us, like we just, I don't, you guys are younger than me, but it just really foreign because we didn't grow up that way. So I didn't want to share things like that, but I don't mind sharing. I don't mind sharing things about me, my personality, my stories, my opinions. I don't mind that at all. So I kind of hit on this formula where I was taking images that I had liked that I actually collected on Pinterest over the years of, you know, that I did either for my own fashion business, for mood boards, or just because I liked them and I wanted to kind of gather a place where it was like, you know, chicest couples ever, most glamorous vacation spot, you know, whatever. And so I was doing that just personally, and I started putting those on Instagram and sharing with with personal anecdotes. And lo and behold, it seemed to strike a chord. I didn't expect that, and I don't know if this is answering your question, but I will say that I was for the first time, and I think it's sort of a statement about where we are today, you know, perhaps as a country and whatever. I was scared to do it. I've never been scared to reveal or share anything about myself and my, you know, my career, which started, you know, I guess when I started Liz Lange Maternity in 1997, I started to become more and more public, and I was always comfy with it. But I find that, and it's probably not what you're expecting me to say, but I find that it's actually on both sides. When I look through my Instagram feed, I'm just being bombarded with people's political opinions, with who they hate, even the people that are quote unquote be kind. They're saying some of the nastiest things about people who they have decided are not kind. And this isn't meant to be political at all. I'm just saying and the cancellations and the anger. And so I was scared. I thought, I understand that what I'm writing is going to read like quote unquote white privilege. These were not words that I was familiar with, but you know, I understood the concept. And I really wasn't looking for it to be that way, but I didn't want to be inauthentic. So it's like, this is who I am. I think that everyone's story is valid. I'm not pretending that I have lived, you know, that I know there are many things that I don't understand, will never understand, all of that. But like, I know what I do understand. And I started sharing it, and I expected to get canceled, and I didn't. I still expect it. I still expect it every day. So that's, I don't know if what that answered or what that
definitely
said,
no, and it's really aligned with the second guest we've had on this week, who is essentially speaking to choosing their lane really clearly. And this expresses a value of mine, which is, okay, I know this way I'm going to be is probably going to not be approved by all people, you know, but I know my heart, I know my intention, and I'm committing to that. You know, that's a huge value of mine. It takes courage, obviously. But yeah, that's what I'm hearing.
That's exactly the way I feel. That's it. And it kind of connects to when I started Liz Lange Maternity. And every now and then, because it's just what happens when you put yourself out there. It wasn't social media, but I would get, you know, I'd get emails. Sometimes they were very mean, like, I hate your clothing, or how dare you charge that amount of money for a dress. And I would just think to myself, you know, not every brand is for everybody. Not everybody is for every brand. That's okay. And I feel that way a bit now, though the stakes are higher because it's all, you know, out there publicly. But yes, I feel like I'm picking this lane. It's authentic to me. And there's so many examples that, from the most minor, like if I post a celebrity in 1960 and she has a cigarette in her hand, or she's got a fur coat thrown over her shoulders, and I'm getting, you probably don't even know, but I get a ton of DMs. It'll say like, how dare you? How dare you? And it's like, and all I can do, and I do it publicly, I do it privately, I try to keep it just very, very polite and very light. I say, this was 1960. Times were different. I'm not endorsing. I'm not condemning. I'm showing you a photograph. I'm actually amazed by how personal everybody takes I'm amazed. I mean, I like, for me, it all feels very strange. Like, it would never cross my mind to be judging what I'm just using, you know, Jackie Kennedy chose to wear, or whether she chose to smoke in 1962. Like, I don't know if I would judge it if she chose to do it today, quite frankly. Like, I am very into kind of, do you, not if you're hurting anyone. I mean, and I wanted very badly, and I've worked very hard, especially on Instagram, to foster a kind of This is a no judgment zone. This is a respite. If you write me a comment, I will answer every single comment, which you've probably seen. I answer every comment because to me, that's just polite and I'm interested. I like the dialogue. But if you write me something very nasty, I will respond, but I'm not going to go there. Like, I'm not going to engage. I'm not going to, you say, I hate this person's politics, or I'm just going to say, oh, I think she looks pretty in this dress. It's not that I don't understand what you're saying. It's not that I'm, just very shallow. It's that is not the point of my social media feed.
Oh my gosh.
I'm a fine art painter, and I'm working on a piece right now that is exploring something I'm passionate about, which is discourse. And discourse that is respectful and kind and compassionate, or varying levels, at least aimed that way. Especially when you disagree, and the reason that I'm working on this piece, which is exploring and expressing some of the avenues when people disagree, that what makes me, what's challenging is to see when people attach I disagree with you with you're a bad person and That's really don't like you, and maybe I hate you, maybe I want
maybe I hate you, maybe I want you dead. I see people celebrating that all the time.
It's like, look into the person's eyes who you're sitting across of disagreeing from, and like ask yourself, would this person help me if I was in mortal danger? And the answer I'm almost positive is almost always yes. And forgetting that so quickly is I think a phenomenon going on right now. And understandably, it's connected to social media and not having consequences of your words. I get that.
Exactly.
But let's retreat a little bit.
I find it. What you said really resonated with me. Exactly. It's very odd to me.
Ron,
where do you think Daniel and I have well, I'm going to throw him under the proverbial bus for a moment, because he does something that has always really impressed me. We've known each other for over a decade, and in this last, year or two, he's been keeping a list of values in his pocket, personal values that he's striving for. It's inspired me a lot to think about the quality of my character, the quality of my energy, how I show up in the world. So much so that I'm kind of meditatively thinking about how can I be the most authentic and true to myself and unoffendable and yet not offended by others, right?
Exactly.
Where did you, I'm in my, close to my mid 40s now, and I feel like I'm just now kind of figuring this out. Like, holy moly, I'm allowed to be myself. I'm allowed to say what I want, and because I come from a culture where I was celebrated for my niceness, but not being authentic. I had to fit in a kind of capsule that had a certain kind of appearance, and that was, good on the outside, but really not totally me in the inside. Where do you think? I know now quite a bit of your story, and the rise, fall, redemption kind of arc, right? But it seemed like there was a thread of that value for you of authenticity always, even in the way that you had like an ulterior or an alter ego, Lisa, who wanted to live in the family just enough. Tell me more about that rootedness and authenticity and rootedness and quality of discourse.
Well, I guess I would say, yes, I did have that fantasy, which was very funny. But I also feel like, and I take it from what you're saying that you've actually listened to the podcast. Is that correct?
It's so good. It is really,
thank you.
really good.
Oh, no. I wasn't looking for compliments. I just wanted to know whether what I was going to say was going to make sense.
Yeah.
So I actually think one of the things I was trying to do when I did the podcast, I don't know if I understood all of it, but it goes to your question, is I actually think that being kind of real or authentic, whatever we want to call it, comes fairly naturally to me, because I actually think that my family, that is something like the way you said, maybe in my family or my culture, it was about, just be nice and don't just, maybe it's whether it's true, whether it's authentic or not authentic, just say the right thing or whatever that means. But my family, I feel like I came from a family of very outspoken, very direct people. And I've grown to think that I'm very pleased about that. It wasn't always easy. But people always ask me, wow, when I listened to that podcast, you were also honest. Wow. And see, it's new for me, because I'm like, well, yeah, if first of all, if I'm doing a memoir, I'm going to be dishonest? Like, what's the point?
Yeah.
And then my family too, I just don't know that know from. Maybe I sometimes wonder if it's a cultural thing, New York City, Jewish, like, I remember like it just, to me, it's all, maybe it's a bad thing. I don't really 100% know how to do the other thing. Like it would probably be good. Like there'll probably be instances. And like you said something about this, again, I'm not saying this is positive. It's neutral.
Yeah.
I find one of the commonalities of the world we're living in today that, again, this is somewhat new, is everybody's offended. Everybody's always offended.
Yeah.
Like it takes so much to offend me. Like I can't even imagine I just don't understand the easy offense. I don't mean, I just wish, I guess you were saying it too, but it all sounds so like fake and like, oh, I'm such a good person. I'm not such a good person. But I do feel like, why can't we just accept that most of us are not trying to offend the other person? So instead of interpreting it in the worst possible way, maybe interpret it in a better way. And conversely, like, obviously I mean, most people, I don't even know if I'm saying this clearly, but I think most people don't mean offense. And I don't think there's such a big reason to constantly walk around offended. And I don't think, as a business person, as someone that started my own brand, like that's just really not going to work. Like I'm worried for this generation sometimes because like life is rough. People are going to say things you don't like. Everything can't be like, no, I can't hear that. So like, and I don't mean it unkindly. Like I don't think anyone should be intentionally nasty to somebody. But
go ahead. Sorry.
Go on. No, I was just say, I just think people can be a little bit more honest. I don't think we're living in a time that encourages that. Not at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. It seems like the way I'm trying to piece it out or have been is that we're getting really attached to specific words and missing the intention and the emotion and the person, behind those words. And it's nuanced. There's a lot of factors, I think, and not that I have it all figured out, but also, there's not a lot it doesn't seem like there's a lot of allowance for mistakes. And it's
there
like,
isn't.
hey, I'm working it out, like
past or present. Like, I mean, it's very frightening because if you made a mistake 5 years ago, that wasn't even necessarily a mistake 5 years ago, because 5 years ago it might have been normal. You could pay a very, very big price today. And it feels like even once I feel like when I watch some people trying to apologize, I'm almost looking at them like dead man walking. I want to say, like, you don't understand. Like, sadly, like no one's going to accept. I don't agree with this, but it feels like no one's going to accept your apology. Like it's it's too late.
We had
into it.
We had a guest earlier on this week, same one I referenced earlier. And in that conversation, he said something that Ron and I were both like, ooh. But we just brought it up later, and said, hey, curious about this thing you said. And it was like, not sure I agree with it, but what do you think? And we just spent about 10 minutes teasing it out. And it was really cool. Like it was never argumentative. He, said, yeah, actually, he said, like, let me rethink that. And here's maybe a better way. I was like, it was awesome. It's like,
so cool. And even at the end, let's say you guys you could have agreed to disagree. Like you could have been like, I understand now what you meant. I still don't agree with it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
I don't expect it. I find that it's funny on Instagram too. People will like write me like, I don't like her. I'm like, okay, like smiley face. Like I do, you don't. Tomato, like all good.
They'll say they don't like someone that you posted a picture of.
Yeah. Let's say I don't care at all. Like I don't care at all. I just see
like, for the really specific
everyone's.
It's a backwards. It seems to be a bit of a backwards form of bringing in content in our life, where we choose to follow people, right? We choose to like, I want to hear the voice of this person and the content they bring us, and then I'm also offended and lead with resentment for whatever they bring to me, and boy, that is like that gets into the old rigmarole real fast. Like it does not lead to generative outcomes. And I really gauge where I'm trying to go in my life by understanding, am I aligning myself with people or organizations that are leading with resentment and leading with this kind of sense of entitlement, or am I trying to align myself with kind of the spirit of the conversations that you're talking about, which is, that's not my intent. Here's, I'm not even going there, and I'm leading with, I don't know. The word that comes to my mind is mirth and joyfulness, and and
humor, like
humor,
birth is humor,
absolutely.
but I feel like there's been a death of humor. Like sometimes even, again, I keep going back to Instagram because I know that's where you guys know me from.
Yeah.
Like I'll find that I'll write something sometimes, and most people do get it. Like this isn't negative. It's
Sure.
just funny. I'll write something and I can tell people are taking it really seriously. I'm like, I was joking. Like it's nothing bad. It's not like I'm getting in trouble because I said something mean about somebody as a joke. I understand that, but more just, even if it's about myself, they'll say, oh, don't feel that way about yourself. It's like, oh no, I don't. I was just like, it's okay that I'm not a good skier. I'm not sad. I'm making a laughing face. like, no, it wasn't mean of my parents to take us on a ski trip. That wasn't my point.
I know what you mean about that when you poke fun at yourself in a good spirit, and then someone's like, "You're being so mean to yourself." It's like, whoa, this is fun.
I'm having fun. I'm not having a bad day. I'm not curled up in a ball over it. Exactly.
There's truth to every joke. It's like, okay,
all right,
pump your brakes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it's strange times indeed, but I'm trying, despite these times, to, within reason, sort of show who I am, even though I don't feel that we're being encouraged to sort of each have our own narratives and opinions. But I'm trying, because otherwise life is so boring. I find everyone's so basic then. Like I like the weird, I like the different, I like the interesting.
You're really succeeding, and it's charming, and it's valued, and it's a healthy, supportive, I think, respite from some of the other content, and even good content. Like you're celebrating something, with your Instagram page, for example. And I really think that celebration is valuable, and it allows people to see into worlds. And your Instagram account is like really clean, it knows, everything matches, and yet you can go on an adventure through the history of this type. I don't know how the best way to say it was, but this demographic, certain level of wealth and class, and not that other people don't have class, in different,
I know you mean socioeconomic.
You know what I mean.
It's just, I know what you mean, exactly. See,
like one of my top 5 favorite books is Errol Flynn's autobiography. Have you ever heard of it?
I mean, of course I know Errol Flynn, but I haven't.
It's awesome. It's so fun. It's called My Wicked Ways, and he wanted to call it In Like Me. That was the title he pitched to because In Like Flynn, that term.
Yes, of course.
Right. Yeah. He wanted to call it In Like Me, and the publishers were like, "Go, you can go F yourself." Like that's not happening. But he called it My Wicked Ways, and I remember reading it, and it shows this man who came from Australia, Tasmania, no less, the Australia of Australia, essentially. And you might know more about him even than I do, haven't read this book, but he was a real adventurer, right? And then he was an adventurer whose adventures took him into this world of a very high society and wealth and glamour and fame. And there was something that I loved about that combination, and something that I get to scratch that itch a little bit by looking at your page. Nice. I don't know, it's just been nice.
I think what I'm trying with both the podcast, my Instagram page, the way I speak to my customers, even in my fashion brands, is to kind of show that obviously, I grew up in a very sort of rarefied world, obviously, but it's kind of like I think I've said this before. It's like, when we all, the whole world loved The Sopranos, when we used to all kind of have shared cultural experiences before everything got so cluttered. So we all used to watch The Sopranos. We loved it. And I think what we loved about it was like, I mean, again, I don't know anything about the two of you, so maybe your fathers were mobsters and that's cool, but mine wasn't. So I'm like, okay, it's not like I come from a mafia family, but we can all relate to this man. We can relate to him. He's got trouble with his business partners, issues with the wife, the kids aren't behaving. And it's like, yeah, okay, mafia, but they're kind of just like us. And I think that's sort of what I think maybe what resonates about my page and my podcast, and what I hear back from people is like, Liz, I didn't grow up like that at all. I had no money. We never went anywhere, blah, blah, blah. But everything you're saying, I get. Yes, I had those same thoughts. I had those same feelings, because I think that there's so much more. I mean, again, I feel like this is making me sound like, I joke that I am Pollyanna because I don't get depressed a lot, but it does feel a little weirdly Pollyannish what I'm saying. But I do think there's humanity in common.
That's right.
So maybe that's what you're surprised about. Even though I was, a privileged 12-year-old. I was still a 12-year-old. So I had the same 12-year-old fantasies and thoughts and insecurities and people I looked up to that any other 12-year-old all around the globe who in every circumstance. And I find that's what seems to be resonating. They're like, wow, yeah, no, I could totally relate. Because like
I'm not familiar with that term Pollyann-ish.
Oh, okay. Pollyanna was a movie in, I want to say, the 50s or 60s. And the starring girl was named Pollyanna. And she was she just always looked on the bright side. She had a lot of bad things happen to her, a lot. But she was so charming and so positive that she won over the small town that she was living in of not very nice villagers. And her grandmother, who was kind of a mean woman, ended up loving her, and who had adopted her. It's long than that. But the word Pollyanna, in my mind, kind of became part of the English language a bit. I'm not saying you should necessarily know it, but it became kind of synonymous with just always looking on the bright side, always looking on the bright side. And I would say that, it takes a lot to bring me down. I don't know what that is about me. I just I don't get like, again, maybe it's helped me a lot as being an entrepreneur. There are always a lot of problems, a lot of issues. And I'm always kind of like, okay, well, what's the solution? And in life. And in life.
As soon as I got your email this morning, I called Ron and I said, we have a problem. And Ron goes, no, we don't. We have solutions.
Exactly. And it was fine. I should have written you back. The second you guys weren't on and I wrote that, I was like, oh, of course. It was specific. When I saw the email before I went to bed last night with 9 a.m., it's just like, of course, because I'm living on the East Coast.
Yeah.
But yes. And I was even thinking, did we say 9 a.m.? But okay. Anyway, then I knew and it was completely fine. So I'm sorry.
Part of that is on me. I actually was realizing after that I could have, and from now on will, when I confirm to reconfirm.
You should.
Yeah, that was my fault. Absolutely.
So in my mid 20s, early 20s, I moved to. I'm going to like omit some details to the story because I'm almost certain you're going to know this family, and I don't want to. I have a kind of a rule in my life is I don't talk shit about people, and
you do that well, actually.
Thanks,
good
man.
job. I didn't realize that was a real
So in my early 20s, I was working for a big corporation in Los Angeles, and who had small offices all over the country, and I was being fast tracked to become a manager of one of these offices, and then my wife at the time, my ex-wife now, got an opportunity to go to a grad school and in a small town in the Southwest, and suddenly I had to move and kind of follow her to go to do this thing. She's a very smart young lady. She had gone to Stanford. Her dad was her Harvard guy. Her grandfather was a Yale guy, a professor there. I'm sorry, Duke. And so I thought, okay, she's an academic and I need to like support her. And the company I was working for said, hey, no problem. We're going to open a store for you in this place. And they didn't. It took months and months, and then it was going on. And in the process, I answered an ad in the paper because I needed to make some money. And I ended up having two jobs. One job was a stockist in a grocery store. And the other job, the ad in the paper said, do you like, or something about, can you help adolescent, preteens with their homework? Something really innocuous sounding. And I said, sure. I thought I could work in the morning, in the afternoon, I can go be a tutor. And I answered the ad, was given an address. The address was through these massive gates in this town on acreage. And I was suddenly with a family who at the time publicly was worth billions. And I was hired as a tutor, but I was really a manny. That was my role. And these children whom were adopted to this older couple came from a foreign country, and they had working memories of their life before this. One of them remembered seeing his mother killed. Another remembers her mother being a sex worker. Like, it was really traumatic stuff. And a couple things. One is they were just completely normal teenagers. And we flew in private jets. We went to, stayed on yachts and the whole deal. The downside to that, though, is if Cruella de Vil needed an architect to be written after, this the mother figure in this story was that. And she had a terrible drinking problem. She was physically and verbally abusive to the point I had to call the police and have an intervention with the school. On some trips, the older gentleman had physically had threatened with violence people who were working with him. You know, he's like, I'm going to get a baseball bat and I'm going to kill you. And this was like a kind of a tottering old man. Like, you know, it was rough. And they were from New York, and we went back and forth, and his family was from New York. And at a certain point, about a year in, I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, everyone who's worked for this family we all have the 1,000-yard stare of having witnessed things that we just can't imagine. And that kind of, you know, I was 24, 25, and that kind of solidified in me this like fear of a society or a group of people that like really did not value humanity and people outside of their close-knit culture. And the interesting thing is, I think now is what was delightful to me when I was introduced to your your Instagram and then later your podcast was there was none of that in your story. And I began to kind of I had to deconstruct my ideas about wealth, and I had to deconstruct my ideas about high society. And then I realized, like, oh, it's all humanity. We're all human, and there are good people at the top and bad people at the top, and good people, you know, in lower lower societies. And it's like really not like, it has nothing to do with anything other than a person's character or how they're leading themselves.
I don't think that point can be overstated, really. You know,
yeah.
I just think that is, it's Jim Carrey said this too. You know, he said, I wish everyone could be rich and famous so they realize ... You know, it ain't the thing. You know, it's a pain in the ass as much, you know, in different ways. You know, and then there's that other thing. I don't know if you've ever heard this, Liz, or if you agree, you know, but there is this this idea out there that when people have up to about $50,000 or $60,000 of income, that they do get happier the closer they approach that number. But after that number, it dramatically there's not much more happiness like that comes with more money. And
I mean, sorry, go on. Sorry.
No, please. That's it. That's
No.
the gist.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's so obviously true. I mean, we could start with a few basics, like having money is good. I mean, it's a positive, right? I mean, like in terms of like, if you get sick, you know, healthcare, there are experiences you can have. Like, it's hard to disagree with the fact that if you had to choose between having money, not having money, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think most people would say, I'd rather have money. Like, you know, all other things being equal.
Yeah,
like,
totally.
Better with money, solves problems. But I think that it's 100% undeniably true that money does not bring happiness. Like, if it brought happiness, we'd see nothing but like a whole group of people that were just thrilled all the time. Like, absolutely not. Like, and in fact, sometimes I think, and I totally get this, that others have told me that they kind of grew up thinking, if only I were rich, that's the issue. Like, I'm not happy, I'm da-da-da, but if I had X amount of dollars, of course they'd be happy. So then it's almost the opposite happens. They get X amount of dollars. And of course the other issues have not gone away because they're, you know, they're personal issues that money can't solve. And then they're even more depressed. Like, it's almost worse. It's like, well, then what? Like, I had this hope almost, there's something almost good about the striving and the thinking that there's something out there that's going to work everything out. And then when you have to face the fact that it's not, that, and what you were saying at the beginning about how, of course, like, I mean, I understand why it might not have been obvious, but of course, like, no matter what your income level or who you know, there are some great people, there's some horrendous people, there's some okay people, and that is just across the board. There's no real way to stereotype, which I think brings us back to, in some ways, the beginning of this conversation with, like, you know, why have all these negative preconceived ideas about anyone, no matter what, even if they voted for somebody that you think is the worst person on the planet. Maybe they voted for that person because they actually thought that person could do a good job. I'm just saying, like, and I'm not, this isn't me, I'm not talking about myself. I'm just saying, like, I'm trying to go to the most extreme. Like, why can't we just think that there is a way that it's not all rich people aren't all evil.
Yeah,
They're not all
yeah.
perfect. They're not all,
I have this little imagination that I do that's been really helpful, which is when I'm hanging out with somebody who maybe I disagree with, or when I see two people disagreeing, maybe not in the most healthy ways. And I also disagree in not healthy ways still to this day with
Of
people.
course, me too. Of course.
And I
I
imagine
don't. I'm
like,
perfect at it.
I imagine being stuck on a desert island with that person,
Mm.
you know, and or those two people being stuck on a desert island. And I'm like, I doubt that they would be at war with each other, you know. I'm pretty sure they would be like, we gotta work together and like do this thing, you know. And maybe that's naive, but I don't think so.
No.
I
It's
don't
the way
think so.
almost every romantic, you know how like the gist of every what I'll call a rom-com or romantic
Yeah.
comedy is that too often, I mean, it's so funny, we've forgotten this in real life. Two people start out, that are going to end up together romantically, and they hate each other. You know how that's like such a common theme. Like they hate
Yeah.
each other. She thinks this of him, he thinks that of her, or if it's two men or two women, whatever they have, and then they get to know each other for some way, and they often end up, they end up together at the end of the movie or the book. So yeah, like that's
That's really funny. You said that. I did one of those DNA tests, years ago.
Yeah.
And occasionally I'll look at it, the results, because it changes based on the population samples of like my genetic background. And my favorite part of my genetic background is that I have some tiny percentage of Neanderthal DNA in there. And the other day I was driving around and my mind started to create a rom-com between the Neanderthal and the Homo sapien. And being from warring villages, or like having, their parents having to talk and their parents trying to separate them, and nothing was going to separate them and everything was going to bring them together. And now I'm the result. I'm going to jump from that a little bit.
Now you're the ancient, you're the kin way down the line.
Yeah. Would explain a lot. Part of why we call this podcast Cutting for Sign is we're trying to, I don't want to make it sound too spooky, but read the tea leaves or read the sign on our next right step in life. And for me, because of my background, maybe because of my personality and just what I do, is I tend to lean into the invisible. I ask for help and assistance from the invisible, whatever that is, which I don't know. I grew up thinking it was one thing. It's a complete mystery to me now. But Daniel says, and I agree, when he leans on it, when I lean on it, it leans back. And things seem to kind of open themselves up for me, and opportunities begin to happen, and assistance seems to come. Is there any of that in your life, or is there, and there doesn't need to be at all, but is there some part of your life where you feel like there is like an assistance outside of yourself that you wouldn't be able to like say, like give a name to, or something like that?
And do you mean like religion or
God,
spirituality? Do you mean those kind of things?
Yeah.
Right. I would say, I always say that I'm not a terribly spiritual person. It's all the opposite. People say like, oh, I'm spiritual, I'm not religious. I'm probably more religious than I am spiritual, although I'm not terribly religious.
Yeah.
But I care a lot about being Jewish. I care a lot about it. I care about the tradition. I care about what it meant. I'm very respectful of it.
Yeah.
But I don't know that I could say that I lean into it in the way that you were describing. I will say, I guess what I don't think this is exactly what you mean, but I try very hard to kind of say yes to a lot of different things. Even I almost would say like, when in doubt, always say yes. Like I just try to say yes. And then when I find that I say yes, that it usually, of course, not always, but usually ultimately, even if it's a few steps away, can lead to something good that I didn't even realize and anyway knew that it could lead to. I always feel like it's so much more upside than downside. I say that to people when they ask me, I mean, this isn't what you mean, but when people ask me about dating, I always think to myself, well, go on the date. I mean, if you don't go on the date, okay, like whatever. But if you go on the date, you might hate him, but you might really like him. Like there's just, and I feel that way about business, about everything. I mean, I think you said invisible, and one of the most like flattering notes I ever got in my life was from the CEO of Target years and years ago, where he was talking about my maternity line. And he said something to me like, you saw the invisible, like that there was this other way that women could dress, even though they didn't know it yet. So I think about it from that perspective, but I don't
I think
know if I
that's a
could say I'm
really
spiritual.
that's a really practical way because Ron knows this, about me and our dynamic. Like we were in a writing group recently, and in the beginning we would do a check-in. All the groups, like almost like in a a men's group or
Self-help or
AA or
something
something,
like
yeah,
that.
self-help or something, and it was always like mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual. And I would get to the spiritual and I'd be like, I already covered it by talking about all the other ones. Like that's how I'm doing, and that's
Yeah.
quote spiritual. It's a little bit vague for me right now, and I just like to cover that stuff and how I'm doing mentally, emotionally, and physically. And I think, and that is to say, more, not to discount that word, but more practically. And I think that the answer that you're giving is a really practical
Yeah.
way that answers that question. And I think is connected to the mystery of everything. Like you just, there's a little, of course you're discerning, but there's a little bit of a opportunity comes and I'm going to trust this. Like, yes, and I'll
Right.
trust myself to get out if it goes pear-shaped, also.
Of
Like that's all part
course.
of it.
Right. Like I'm not saying, I always worry. I'm not saying you should headlong,
Yeah,
head
yeah.
straight into
Yeah.
danger like an idiot. Like I just more mean that like, yes, like with a certain amount of reason and judgment, I think most things, because I always feel like so that it takes you like, even, I mean, again, because I'm asked often for business advice,
Mhm.
it's always like, well, it's not that you're going to just do it. It's that, why don't you just, everything you do maybe brings you one step in a positive direction or closer. Who knows where those steps will ultimately go? We don't know. But if every step is kind of possibly going towards something,
Mhm.
usually I find things happen, whether it's what you thought was going to happen or something else, but something good. So and
Yeah.
that's connected to me to saying yes. Like, unless I
Yeah.
can't, I try to say yes. Like I didn't, this podcast is an example. I didn't know you guys, like, like I'm just saying,
I'm surprised,
honestly,
to be honest.
but it's like, what, why not? Like what, people are always
That's
surprised. They'll always
awesome.
say, well, why?
That's
Even answering emails or answering comments. Cause you never know. Like, why wouldn't I? Like they took the
Yeah.
time to write something to me. Why wouldn't I? Right.
It's like another guest of ours, Steve Maxwell, an amazing human, a movement specialist, and he's pretty high up in the lineage of American jiu-jitsu that
Oh,
have studied under the Gracie family. It's like he was the first American white guy to get a Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt from the. So, anyways, yeah, he's lived this epic life, and we were talking to him, and excuse me, we were kind of speaking to this, like how we create our opportunities and our success. And he goes, it always, for him, he goes, it always comes from other people, always.
Yeah.
And it was just so cool, like humble, and it's humble of you. Maybe that's too strong of a word, but like, how cool is that you say yes to things that you're not 100% sure of, and that it's also kind of like confident. You're like, I know I can handle this and I'll be fine. I love
I
it.
feel like it's almost to me though, like, so it's almost, I don't mean this, it's almost self-serving. Like, I don't really understand the
Yeah,
opposite.
sure.
Like sometimes I'll say like, yeah, I answer customers. I answer customer emails. Sure. I think it's the right thing to do. I think it's nice. I think it's good.
Yeah.
It's also really great for me. Like, I find you always get something out of it. Like, oh, but
Nice.
then I'm learning something about our customer. Then I'm learning something about the world. Like, I'm interacting with you all on Instagram. I'm learning, like oh, they feel this way, interesting, or, any experience. You just like, I don't feel like almost like people aren't acting in their, I think it is actually self-interested in the best possible way.
Yeah.
To take opportunities. I mean, in terms of spirituality, and maybe this is the Jewish part, I do believe that we only live once. I understand not everybody does, but since I believe that, I'm like, I'm here, like, we're doing this, like, this is my life, like, I can't say I'm perfect at it. I mean, this is what I'm striving for. I'm not perfect at it, far from it, but I might as well be doing as much as I can, having these different opportunities, seeing where they lead. Some lead nowhere, some lead somewhere. Like, what else?
A little side note. I feel like I'm getting a lot of Jewish education right now because I'm listening to Seth Rogen's his book. I don't know if you've heard it. I didn't even know he wrote a book, but
I didn't know he wrote a book, but I'm very aware of what's going on with him. I know exactly who he is. Yeah.
He deep dives into his, I mean, it starts out with his family. So it's just like Jewish.
He's hilarious.
He's rooting around in it.
Yeah.
That's great.
I feel like I'm the same way. You probably noticed it on my podcast. Like, somehow the Jewish thing for some of us is just very central.
I I appreciate the honesty in all that. Like there's just like, this is how I am. This is where
Yeah.
so I was raised to essentially become an evangelical pastor. Like
Wow.
I was, everything around me and my family was pushing me towards that. And I could never like connect the dots in my mind as owning that personally for me.
Mhm.
And yet I've recognized that a lot of it is still kind of in my brain in a maybe a way that some people like happens to them when they're like kidnapped and taken to like the cult or something. And I'm not mad at my mom and dad. Like I think they were trying the best they could with what
I
they
always
had.
say that. I think
Yeah.
that, by the way, I think
Mhm.
that's the most healthy way that people can feel. I see
Yeah.
too much complaining about people's parents. Everyone was doing their best. I mean, and obviously
Totally.
not in extreme positions,
Yeah.
like when you said someone was physically abusive, but
Totally.
generally they were
Yeah.
where they were trying their hardest. It's not easy.
That's
Sorry,
a
go
heavy
on.
mind.
Yeah.
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 No, that's
yeah.
awesome. Thank you.
And so I had to like cut myself off from that culture for a long time. And I've in kind of my own like, I don't know, just taking care of myself. I'm really trying to remove the voice of the critic, the inner critic, remove the self-judgment, all that stuff. And for some reason I listened to Krista Tippett on Being, and I'm not, are you familiar with that podcast?
I am, but I haven't listened to it.
Okay, don't worry about it. And
Okay.
and she interviewed a guy, a theologian who passed away a bunch of years ago, and he talked about the honesty of the Psalms. And I was like, honesty in the Psalms, and I couldn't quite get my head around it. And he wrote a vernacular version of the entire Bible. His name's Eugene Peterson, this theologian, and it's like really easy to read and also a little bit clunky because he translated it from Hebrew into English, and it says things like, God punched my enemy in the nose, make his baby, like really kind of dirty, like, whoa, grimy stuff.
That's kind of what that's kind of what it's like.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And the gift to me though is like I thought I had this like invisible filter in my mind of thoughts about other people and myself and the world and my experience. And I'm like, good Lord, Ronald, like allow yourself to be honest. Allow yourself to say exactly what you want to say. It can be hyperbole, it could be metaphor, it could be simile, but just don't hold back internally. And I'm learning so much about myself just in that very simple exercise. And then watching you, who are like, you don't have the filter, but you also have an incredible amount of dignity and respect for yourself and those around you. And just like you said, we're all just doing the best we can
Right.
with what we got. And I think there's something also about your stance that there's a limit. And maybe some of this is because of your own experience with your health. And maybe your brush with mortality. Yeah, but it's like I'm gonna get the juice of life out of this moment, and it's speaking to me, Liz.
Yeah, no, I get it. I feel that way. I mean, and I like what you said, and I agree. Like, I feel like, that, we also just don't have to pretend. I actually love the honesty of the Torah, of the Old Testament, which I'm sure part of this was translated from that.
Oh yeah.
Where, it's not what people think. It's not all like God was so sweet and da da da. It's real. It's real emotions. It's jealousy. It's anger. It's revenge, and like, like, I don't know. Like, I love the lack of fakeness, I guess is what I'm saying.
We
That's my big
experience
thing.
those things too, right? Like I think of an inner world sometimes as an actual, place or, and what's going on down there. And, we can filter things out and we can express them in mature ways. But the truth is some of the inner world is fucking war, I mean, like,
Exactly. Who are we kidding?
Exactly.
Right. Totally. And I do feel sorry for grownups, for people in their 40s and 50s that are still somehow, and maybe this is the most judgmental thing I'm going to say on the show, but I guess I honestly feel this way.
Yeah.
Who are still kind of complaining and blaming their life on their family or their parents. Because unless it's the most extreme circumstance, like what you described, those two teenagers when, what they had been through prior to the adoption and maybe the adoption, but even you said were normal. It's like, it's just something in my mind, pathetic is a very mean word, but I can't think of a better one. Something pathetic about it. It's like, own your life. Like, I don't know
Yeah,
what your
that's
parents
right.
did. I don't know, like, but like, even if they like own it, like at this point, it's nobody's fault but yours. Kind of like,
Yeah.
and
It's
that's
the
sort of the
truth.
way I'm feeling about all this victim-y stuff. Like, I'm
Yeah.
not generally, and I'm not making a
Yeah.
political statement, but generally, like, try to own your life.
At some point in time, the buck stops with each one of us, and it's my choice. There's this great book by an author named Viktor Frankl,
Yeah.
and Man's Search for Meaning. Oh, you're familiar?
Yeah. I am
Awesome.
familiar with that because yeah.
Yeah, and I just think that's the best, one of the most powerful examples of what we're talking about is what's one of the worst things on this planet that could have happened to you. It would be going to Auschwitz and being a Jew during that time.
Yeah.
And it happened to him. And then during that process, he ends up taking accountability and being like, no, this was on me and it's a nuanced situation, but
Right.
he arrived to that place. And I was just like, whoa, how can I ever complain about anything again, really?
Exactly.
And then it challenges you too to use one's intellect and be like, well, how is this my fault? Like, how is this on me? And sometimes it gets really close to the vest, and with him, I just think it was amazing that he was empowered to be like, oh, you know what? It's after everything, it's still my choice to decide how and choose how I respond to what's happening to me. And the fact that he had such a powerful mind and spirit or whatever, he could do that with being, tortured and having his family killed.
Yeah.
It's amazing, right? I think it speaks to what you're saying.
It's unreal. Yes. And I feel that way. Like, I mean, again, I'm not him. I'm not even close. I'm like, I worship. But like, for instance, when I was younger, a very pivotal thing happened that I actually wrote my college essay on, which was I was at Yale summer school, but it wasn't Yale, just summer school when I was in 11th grade. And one night I came back to my room and a bunch of kids who lived in the same dorm had kind of like torn up some of my clothing. Like, they had kind of destroyed some of my clothing. So of course, my first reaction with my friends at that time was, outrage, fury. How dare they? Like, I hate them, and how dare they? And they're just jealous of me, and they're jealous of my clothes, and oh my goodness. And then I don't know how, because I was young and it was weird. It kind of hit me that these kids hated me, and I had done something. I clearly, whether consciously or unconsciously, had created that situation. Like, they didn't hate everybody, like they hated me. And then it changed me. Like, I actually became friends with some of them. I apologized to some of them. It was like this weird, maybe it was as close as I've ever got to a spiritual moment where it was kind of like, instead of being angry, maybe I need to think about what it is about the way I presented myself at this summer school that has made a group of kids, not just one, but a group of kids, feel this way about me. Like, they don't like me. They think I'm a snob. They think I'm a, like, and it changed. It literally changed me.
What a great example of that. Yeah, that's a great example.
Right. I mean, it's not Auschwitz. I'm not even trying,
No,
it's nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
But it was just this strange moment.
Liz, I know we're going to, sorry, Ron, do you have something to say?
I mean, I'm sitting here, unfortunately talking through the lens of where I grew up, and I'm like, that seems miraculous that you would have this moment of clarity, of personal responsibility, where victimhood would be the most obvious.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah. It was weird. I was feeling that way. It took a minute. Like, it wasn't like my first reaction.
Yeah, of course. How could it not?
But it just, all of a sudden, I was like, these kids actually I always kind of liked these kids. Like, they seemed nice. I thought we were friends. Right. So it was kind of,
Yeah, there's definitely a process, right? Viktor Frankl didn't walk into Auschwitz and be like, you know what? I got this. I know we're about to lose you, but I wanted to ask one just little selfish question. And it was kind of cool you just mentioned Yale, because I just had recently had this very sweet romance with this woman and she was a Yale graduate. And so I was sending her she's really got nice fashion sense. And so I was telling her, hey, we're speaking with Liz Lange. Have you heard of her? And I sent her the FIG website. And she got back to me yesterday, and she was saying some comments about the clothes, and she goes, I bet that all of those prints are from specific places and chosen specifically. And I wanted to ask you if.
Well, yes, but they're all vintage prints. And so I spent a lot of time kind of dealing with like vintage dealers who sell old prints. So it's not that they're all, so that's where they come from. And then Yeah, then we recolor them and we do different things with them, but that's where
I didn't even know what print meant. I had to ask her, like, what does that mean, print?
That's
Do you know what
funny.
print means?
Do I? Are you asking me?
I didn't
Yeah.
think you were asking me.
Liz, do you? No, that
I
is
don't
not
think I
happening.
do. It's funny, in Santa Fe, I ended up
You
selling
laughed like
high-
you were laughing at me, like you did know.
I'll stop. I before we lose you, Liz, I will have to say my wife says, who I've been married to 13 years, Liz is a legend and has inspired her and others that she knows. So she's walking the Camino de Santiago in Spain right now. And
wow.
yeah, she's on day 16, I think.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So
That's
thanks for
legendary.
joining us. This is a really
Yeah,
fun
what a pleasure.
conversation. You've helped me a lot. I'm like really rethinking some things about myself. So I appreciate that.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you. This
Thank
was
you
such
so
a
much,
pleasure,
Liz.
guys. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you.
Really good. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, have a good day, and we'll really looking forward to continuing to see your stuff on Insta and getting a little further into that. Now that I know you too, it's like, okay, it kind of makes even more sense. And so thank you so much, Liz.
Yeah, Liz.
Thank you both. Thank
really,
you.
really good time. Really
nice.
fun.
I'm happy to
Okay.
come on and do it for longer at another time if that
Awesome.
if this is too short.
Awesome.
So,
Absolutely.
We
Let's
take you
do
up
it.
on
yeah.
that.
Cool.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Bye-bye,
Take care.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
guys. Thanks.
Let's just jump into the field dressing
Yeah,
here.
it's okay.
Yeah, man. I'm really glad we had Liz on today. And again, I didn't have any idea who she was. And I think that
Well, yeah, you did when she came on.
oh no. Oh yeah, obviously when she came on, but when I first was introduced to her, right? And and I don't know
We
if
should
I
do that though. Have someone we don't know, literally don't know who they are.
Dude,
Okay, what's your name?
I'm sure. Yeah, well, I'm not.
We could
strangers
do
on the
like I've
street
been
kind of
thinking about
thing.
this. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry. I
Yeah.
guess I do mean to cut you off, but forgive me.
Please stop talking, Ronald.
No. Just pause. I've thought that doing the smart list thing where you surprise me or I surprise you with a guest, we should do that.
Give that a shot.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
You don't seem as enthusiastic as I thought you were gonna.
Well, I was gonna say like we bring in each other's ex-wives.
Oh yeah. No, that's definitely a trust fall. Anyways, what was the boring point you were making?
Yeah, it is super boring.
Sorry,
it is super
just kidding.
boring. I don't know, man. I guess I'm realizing like how inauthentic I've been most of my life.
Dude, aren't we all, man?
I mean, geez, like
yeah.
I wish I could say it wasn't true, but Jesus, it is true. Like
I
I
hear
just,
you, brother.
you know, and Liz instills a kind of authenticity that is so approachable and like innocent in not a naive way. I think sometimes we think of innocence as naivety, right? Or maybe it's a better way to say it is the word you used with her, which is humble, right? But that conversation or the story she talked about being a teenager at the summer school at Yale, it's like, what teenager does that? What kid does that?
That was fucking baller, man. That was that was a very cool, because that is an example of what Viktor Frankl did that's manageable and in regularly normal person's life, you know, like he's not in one of the worst situations. She wasn't in one of the worst situations a human can be in, like he was, but she's like, this is how that applied to my life. And I think that her saying that was kind of spiritual too.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know if I would use that word, and she wasn't jumping on that word either,
totally.
But the thing is I think that, you know, there's a lot of fucky weird stuff going on. We don't really know what the hell's going on here with us living in, you know, on Earth and being in human bodies. Like, what's really happening? We don't know, you know. Ergo, this has been hitting me a lot lately that, well, probably a lot of stuff that's happening to us is happening for reasons that we're just, as a species, we're not aware of yet, you know. And when weird shit, like you make an emotional inner decision to take some accountability in a situation like she did with her classmates during that summer school.
Yeah.
And then shit starts to change, you know, well, maybe you made a decision and that decision is affecting other people in, like she said, subconscious. Whether that was really wise that she used the word subconscious, you know.
Yeah.
And go further than subconscious, maybe in a metaphysical way, you know. I'm not trying to say that that's what happened, but we don't know, you know. And that idea of you and I talk about of we lean and something supports back, that's I'm talking about the mystery. Like, I don't know what the fuck it is, but
Yeah.
maybe there's a scientific reason that we experience things like that we will know in 100 years, 50 years, 500 years as a species.
I saw some like business thinker the other day break down Simon Sinek, I think who it was, but he talked about the metric that the Navy SEALs use to build their most elite team, and he said they have to be high performers and they have to be trustworthy, right? Like that's the cross section. And they talked about how he spoke about how most businesses and most people think that high performance is the most valuable quality, the ability to perform at a high level. And he said, but this team actually looks for medium grade performance, but is in the most trustworthy section.
Oh, cool.
And I think that's what she demonstrated, that even in the face of, that 11th grade, drama, she decided to turn that around and be like, I'm going to take personal responsibility for this.
Yeah, what high schooler does that? Like, that's fucking it's so mature.
It is so mature.
And I was thinking about that when she said
Yeah.
that, because she was saying, she was basically speaking to, well, if I'm getting the same feedback from more than one person, because she said it wasn't one, it was a group of people,
Yeah.
then maybe it's a me problem,
Yeah.
And the area I get stuck around that, where I get like is around some of my conflicts with girls, with women,
Yeah.
ex-partners, things like that, people I date, because that's where a lot of my shittiness like will come up, a lot of my
I don't
weakness.
know what you're talking about.
Weakness. That's because I don't date you, Ron. And I sometimes, look back at the last year or two, and I'm like, I kind of getting similar feedback from more than one person, but I want to say in my head, no, that was them for this reason, and this other person, no, that was them for that reason.
Yeah.
But when she said that, I was like, okay, all right, maybe I need to consider how that is me more. And I have considered that, but maybe I just need to decide, like she did, this is a me problem.
Dude, I mean, off air conversations between you and I recently have been about me realizing how much more responsibility I need to take around certain parts of my life.
Yeah.
And that it doesn't need to be overthought. It doesn't need to be like broken down on like spooky spiritual reasons or anything other than practical responsibility for the life that I want to live.
Yeah.
And that there's no offense in myself or whatever's happened to me, and that I get to choose to do the right thing. And I mean, when I heard her talk about even answering customer emails, I mean, that's the right thing. That's just doing the right thing versus making a lackey do it, making an underling do it, making a call center and in another country do it. It's like she's like, I'm taking personal responsibility for my brand and my business, and here I am, I'm doing this. And I've already been on this path of like, Ronald, how can I take more responsibility for my life? Truly. And and then hearing her like, well, it's not as hard as I thought it was going to be. Like she has this like happiness and humor. This is the word she used, humor around it. And I'm like, it can be easy. You can admit, man, I cannot remember things. I need to have them on a schedule. I can't continue to try to people please with certain things in my life.
Yeah.
I got to say no, right? She's saying yes, which is helping her. I've got to say no to certain things. And
well, it's not just saying yes, it's the way you say yes, right? Like you check your schedule first before.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah. That was, I think that was like one of the top guests we had on, where we were like, I don't really know what their comfort level or connection, and when she got on, because it's the field dressing, right? We kind of deconstruct the thing that we were after. And I don't know, the first couple minutes I was like, oh yeah, she doesn't know who she's talking to, and she's not sure about it, and she should be, because I can't believe she said yes, like that she wanted to have this conversation. And I was like, okay, we got you, we got you, Liz. And I think that it was really cool. My experience of it was that after literally a minute or so of her like being like, who are these fucking guys?
Yeah.
You know,
These two dudes.
we flowed into what a nice conversation. That was
Such
a good conversation.
Yeah, that was good. It felt like to me like a great, I don't know. I mean, this is probably oversimplifying it, but like a big sister I needed to talk to for a minute and just get her advice and her experience.
Nice.
And dude, that was great. And her generosity is amazing. And
I like that she said, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I mean, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say I like that she said me saying yes to things. That's why I'm on this podcast.
Yeah.
I was like, oh yeah, it makes sense now because I was kind of wondering, like that's a lot of trust, man. She's full schedule, I assume, and spend an hour. An hour can be really awkward amount of time and a long time if you're not into it.
Dude, if you're not ready, it could be the longest amount of time.
Oh, one I wanted to share one thing that happened to me during that conversation when I brought up Steve Maxwell. Which by the way, I had a dream last night that he died.
Oh.
And that I had to deliver the news of his death to his students. And in the dream, I was hugging one of his students who was running her own school.
Yeah.
And I had to call her out out of class to tell her that he died. And she wouldn't come. And I kept saying, it's important.
Yeah.
And she was trying to start class. And I was like, and she was waiting for Steve. And I was like, do you come here?
Yeah.
We're walking downstairs. And she starts to I can't see her. She's behind me. And I hear her mutter, I'm starting to be afraid of why you want to talk. And all I did is while we're walking down is I said, yeah. And then that was the delivery of the news. And by the time we got to the bottom of the stairs, I just turned to her. She turned to me and we hugged and we started crying. And it was like chest shaking crying. And that's how I woke up this morning. I woke up, cried myself awake.
What?
Yeah, dude.
Oh my gosh, that is intense, Danny.
Oh, it was really intense, man. It was so sad. It was just like sadness and holding this like person really close. Anyway, so Steve Maxwell was on my mind. I should check and make sure he's alive.
He's doing. I commented on his post yesterday. He seems to be doing great. He just awarded 2 black belts
cool.
last week. So,
well, when I brought him up today, I don't know how often this happens to you, man, but it's terrifying when it does. You bring something up, you prelude it, but by the time you get done with the prelude, you forgot why you brought it up.
The story of my life.
we gotta look back at the video of this because there's about a 5-second period where I had no fucking idea why I brought him up. But I'm getting better at those moments because I know you just gotta shit your pants and be like, it's gonna come back.
Yeah.
And right at the moment where it would have started to get awkward, I remembered. And I was just like, oh my God.
Oh gosh. Dan, I think we're probably the king of that. Like I think of like, I should tell this story. I should tell this anecdote. And then as I'm telling it, I'm like, where am I? I have no idea where I am. I don't know who I am anymore. Like, who are you guys? What are we talking
Other
about?
shit starts to fall away. That's fucking hilarious, dude. It's true, man. Fight or flight comes on. You're like, where am I? I need to get out of here.
My wife and I have led a number of groups together in a kind of a teaching position, and a few times she's called me out and being like, dude, sometimes you start talking and you leave the room. Your mouth is moving, but it has no bearing on anything that we've been talking about.
There was one time today where I was like, Ron, Ron, where are you going?
I can see it Liz's face. Like she's trying so hard to follow along.
I almost said, and I was going to be really nice. I almost said, why did you bring that up? But in my head, it wasn't coming out as nice as it could have been. So I was like, I'll give him another 10 seconds, and you wrapped it around.
Oh, thank God. Miracle. Oh, okay. Speaking of miracle, that's the last thing I'll say about like what I picked up and grew from is like probably my propensity to over spiritualize and overcomplicate things with like, this mysterious, what's the mysterious meaning to this? And instead of like, just do the right thing. Yeah. Do the right thing over and over again. Do the right thing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome.
So simple.
You said something a different way than you said it before. And I really liked it. You referred to the mystery as the invisible. And then, excuse me, instead of saying your Christian upbringing, which you did later, you talked about it, but in this first time you brought it up, you said a relationship with the invisible. And then you said something like, and I had a different expression of that when I was a kid. And it was really cool to see you express this point that we bring up a lot, which is our relationship to the mystery, universe, God, all of the ways that we say that. And that the way you did it today, it did not point towards Christianity at all. And I thought that would be a good like tool in the tool belt, to have, is to be able to talk about that type of thing and reference your upbringing, but never bring up Christianity. And I'm not saying, that's why I say a tool in the tool belt, because I'm not saying that always needs to be the case, but it was just cool to see you reference your spirituality and your past spirituality and not have it, bring up Christianity, the topic of Christianity. And not to say that there's anything wrong with that, but sometimes it's nice to not have it. And I thought that was a new way I'd seen you do that.
One, thank you for saying that. And two, why is it? Because Christianity is because I maybe unknowingly present as like Christian. Yeah. Gotcha.
Yeah. It takes, and I feel people get on guard for 5 or 10 seconds.
They should.
Sometimes more. Brianna Noble did that. Remember, and she said it too. She was like,
that's right. That's right.
I just think it's something to be careful of, it doing all the time. And again, if someone's Christian, that's different, but
totally,
you consider yourself Christian-ish and sometimes not. And you're in a place where your spirituality is being relabeled, and and the nuance of it is being discovered. And I just think that it was cool to see you talk about it and it have nothing to do with Christianity. And again, I don't want to, like, every time I say that, I feel like I'm anti-Christian, which I am not.
I don't think you are at all. Like,
it was just, it was new. It was different.
Thanks, man.
That was interesting.
I appreciate that. Well, I love you bringing up Viktor Frankl again. You've brought it up so much that I think I'm gonna have to finally read it.
It's been a while since I have. You definitely should read it. It's amazing.
I think I may go pick it up.
Top 5 most influential books in my life.
Wow.
100%. I recently re-listened to it, and I need to do it. I would like to do it again, because it's just your mainlining, goodness. That was pretty cool. She'd heard of it. It doesn't really happen very often. Someone's like, I thought that was cool. She's like, shut up with your Viktor Frankl stuff. I know the book. I was like, I know.
No, man, she was the opposite. She obviously revered Viktor Frankl. And
no, I mean that like, she's like,
like she knew way more than you did. Yeah. No, I think it was all good, man. Yeah. We did it again, Daniel. We had another conversation with somebody. This was super fun. Really surprising to get to talk to her. And
it went well for you?
Yeah, I think so. I think I was like you at the beginning, first 5 minutes. I'm like, what are we doing? What are we talking about? Man. Thankfully, man, I've been kind of binging her podcast a little bit, and she's a natural, really good storyteller. And she has a story worth telling, because there's a lot of story-like qualities, myth-like qualities in her story.
I neglected to put the little bit about her podcast in the podcast she was part of in the intro. Can you say the name of it? And it's a Sony one, and I forgot the name. It's like
let me reference it here real quick.
It's like something family.
Yeah,
but it's only it's a short one. It's like five episodes, and that's the whole thing, right?
It's actually, I think they're up to 10 episodes now.
So it's continuing. It's still going.
I don't think it's continuing. I think it's a limited run. But the podcast is called The Just Enough Family. It came out in September of 2021. And the reason she calls it the Just Enough Family is she grew up in opulence, and she talked about, I don't want to ruin the podcast or anything, but all like, Daddy Warbucks kind of opulence, and she thought this is just the way life is, as naively as her young self was. But at a certain point she realized, like, this isn't that normal, and she created an alter ego called Lisa, and that she kept a journal of, and the fantasy was like that she would live a life of not too much, because of it's all its difficulties and trappings, but the just enough family. and that was her fantasy. And it's very sweet
Oh.
to hear her say that from her own mouth in this podcast. It's a really good podcast. I'm so impressed with the producers and writers and all that. It's cool. I love that we get to be in this world of like curated and uncurated storytelling and
Yeah.
conversations,
Yeah.
and the little sips that we get from social media, especially as we were talking about our humanity's propensity towards resentment and being offended and wanting to like tell everybody we're offended by something, is like, gosh, it's vapid, and I'm tired. Everyone's tired of it. Everybody's like really like exhausted of it. And
Well, I like the story. Sorry.
yeah, and to hear this unjudgmental telling of her own story,
Yeah.
and her encouragement by being so humble about everybody. Like, there's like, it's an assumption of goodness, I think, is what is how kind of she leads, and I love it.
You mentioned storytelling, and one of those little ads popped up on YouTube last night, and it was for podcasting. I guess I've been Googling podcasting more or something. And the guy was talking about being a storyteller, right? And I was thinking about what you and I do, and I go, you know what? Yeah, we need to be better storytellers, you and I, because even when you just take your 1 minute turn, you and I tell a lot of little stories, and whoever we're talking to does too. Every time we take a little turn, I don't know, it's some form of a story, right?
Yeah.
Participating in one, starting one, telling one. And I just thought, yeah, me and Ron, like, we should start talking about what makes a good story, and you and I do that through writing a lot, but how would the writing principles of story translate to a conversation where you're telling a lot of little stories?
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. I don't know the answer, but I think awareness around it, which I want, because I was already thinking, man, I want to be a good storyteller.
Yeah.
I want to be good at that. I was here comes a story. Let's see if I can.
Okay, you got 5 seconds to hook me.
Yeah. Okay, here it is.
Thanks for listening to Cutting for Side. End of episode. Ronald's fail.
I spent the summer of my 20th year in Zambia, volunteering at a hospital and an orphanage, and we had some friends come to visit us of the group that I was with, and the kind of leader of that organization was a surgeon, and he was such a nice, humble dude. And he, as a gift at the end of his stay there, wrote a little poem for everybody that was a reflection of their character and what he saw as light and value in their life. And he got to me and he goes, "Ron, you're a storyteller. You're a natural storyteller." And he just was very encouraging. And I've never forgot that. And I've always wanted to follow that thread. And I'm trying to do that right now. And I want to get better. I want to make that skill better in my life.
It's a tough time to do that too, I think, in one way. I've been thinking about this with the way you tell stories, actually, because you are a good storyteller and you have stories to tell, And I think that what's challenging about telling stories these days is that for a long, long time, millions of years, apparently, we've been listening to stories, around a campfire.
Yeah.
We've been listening to stories longer than we've been reading stories. And I think we think of reading as a pretty ancient thing, right?
Yeah, right.
But for a lot of those years, I bet those stories were pretty methodically told, just because life has been speeding up, and attention spans have been more demanding of, moving forward. Let's move forward with the next thing. And I feel that in when I hear stories told, and I think it's challenging because you have a nice like settle in for the story, way of telling stories. And you also have I've seen you hustle stories. And I think that for you and I to get better at telling stories, I think one thing that we definitely should have our eye on is pace,
Yeah.
Is now a time for a settle in, or is now a time for the move it along? And when should I transition in between those and flow? And that sounds fun to start to work that out more.
Yeah, it does. It really does. I've got my copy of The Science of Storytelling right next to me on the desk, and I try to take a little bit in a time.
Cool.
Thanks to Jason Hanasek,
Awesome.
who was a past guest on here. So I'm thinking about it, man. I'm really, really thinking about it. But
Yeah.
it's like I was thinking about that through the lens of writing, like you said
Yeah.
earlier. And
Yeah.
now I'm like, how can I apply that to these 1 minute, 5 minute, 15-minute
Totally, man.
opportunities?
Yeah, because we're asking for people's attention, and there's a lot out there. And
Yeah.
just being better with our language. I know, in the Toastmasters ways, the literally cleaning up the stalls and the ums, which is definitely something I need to do.
Same.
So yeah,
Cool,
I love
man.
it. Good conversation. Thank you.
Great conversation. A lot of fun. Let's do another one. How about we do this again?
Let's do this 500 more times.
Okay.
We get to episode 552. I'm out.
And that's all mine.
Isn't it crazy to think about we've done 52 episodes and then you think 10 times that would be, like 520 episodes. And then you think I'll feel like most of the podcasts I listen to or come across these days have at least 500 episodes. And I'm just like, oh my God. And yet there's this boneyard of 3-episode podcasts that I guess is just unbelievably, vast. So I'm just like, 50 seems like so much sometimes. I'm really proud of us. And then other times I'm just like, oh my God, we're little babies.
Totally.
All right.
Hey, good to see you. Thanks for doing this again. Appreciate you. Love you, dude. Bye-bye.